Welcome to our channel, where true stories meet timeless lessons. If you're new here, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We share powerful tales like this one every single day. And while you're watching, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We love seeing our global community grow, one story at a time. Today's episode takes you behind the gates of Buckingham Palace, where silence spoke louder than words. But don't go anywhere. Tomorrow at this exact time, we'll bring you another unforgettable story of courage, conviction, and the human spirit. Let's begin. She tried to destroy a royal guard's cross. His response silenced everyone. The crisp London air hung still outside Buckingham Palace as tourists shuffled into place, snapping photos and whispering in awe at the pageantry unfolding before them. But amid the glint of ceremonial rifles and the rhythmic echo of booted footsteps, one figure stood out. Not because he moved, but because he didn't. Corporal David Langston, 36 years old, stood at rigid attention in the famous scarlet tunic and tall bearskin hat of the Queen's Guard. At 6'1" and 195 pounds, he looked like a man carved from stone. His rifle rested upright against his shoulder. His gaze was locked forward, unflinching. Most visitors saw only the surface, a stoic statue, a tourist attraction in a red coat. But beneath the polished brass buttons and military precision, there was something more, something deeply personal. Tucked just beneath the collar of his uniform, barely visible to the casual eye, was a simple silver cross on a thin chain. It wasn't regulation, and it wasn't meant to be seen. It was a piece of his past, a memorial, a quiet testament to someone who never made it home. That cross had once belonged to his younger brother, Jacob, a combat medic who had died in Kandahar while dragging two wounded soldiers out of a burning Humvee. When they found him, the cross was still clutched in his hand, melted slightly at the edges from the heat but intact, just like the faith he'd carried into every battle. David had served too, 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He knew the sounds of chaos, the weight of loss, the blur of adrenaline and despair. But here at Buckingham Palace, he served a different duty, a quieter one, a duty of presence, tradition, and composure. Yet the man behind the uniform had not left the battlefield behind. He carried it every day, tucked beneath his collar, against his chest, close to his heart. To the world, it was just another ceremonial day. But for Corporal Langston, every hour on duty was a quiet act of remembrance, a way to honor not just the fallen, but the reasons they fought. And as the sun glinted off that hidden silver cross, it told a story no one could see, unless they looked a little closer. She arrived with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Victoria Harlan, a 44-year-old venture capitalist from Chicago, stood just outside the ceremonial rope at Buckingham Palace, her designer trench coat fluttering in the breeze, 4-inch heels clicking against the stone. At 5'7" and 140 pounds, she wasn't imposing by size. But her presence, her voice, and her absolute certainty drew attention like gravity. Her eyes locked onto Corporal David Langston, the silent guard who hadn't flinched once in the last hour. To her, he wasn't a man honoring the memory of a fallen brother. He was a symbol of everything she believed was wrong with the modern world: superstition, blind tradition, outdated institutions clinging to rituals in the face of progress. And then she saw it, the silver cross, peeking out just slightly from beneath Langston's collar. That was her moment. "Look at that," she scoffed, loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. A royal guard clinging to a relic like that? How very medieval. Her voice cut through the air, crisp and surgical. She stepped closer, heels grinding against the pavement. "I wonder, does it protect you? Or is it just there to make you feel safe?" She didn't speak like someone asking a question. She spoke like a prosecutor building her case. David remained motionless, eyes fixed forward, the perfect image of discipline. But inside, he felt the shift, the confrontation forming like a storm just beyond the parade ropes. Victoria wasn't done. "You're trained in modern warfare, I assume. Lasers, satellites, ballistics. And yet," she gestured toward the cross, "you're clinging to jewelry from the Bronze Age?" Tourists began to exchange uneasy glances. A child asked his mother what was happening. A veteran in the crowd shifted his weight, jaw tight. Victoria pressed on, relentless. "Faith," she said with a smirk, "is a hypothesis that's failed every test of reason. Yet here you are, standing still, silent, obedient, as if silence somehow makes belief respectable. Still, Langston didn't move, but something had shifted, not in posture, but in presence. Because she hadn't just seen a cross, she had chosen to challenge the very thing it stood for. And the air around Buckingham Palace had suddenly grown heavier, not from weather buff, but from the weight of a confrontation about to go too far. She didn't just stop at words. Victoria's voice had already pierced the quiet dignity of Buckingham Palace like a siren in a church. But now, emboldened by the growing attention, she crossed the line, literally. In one swift motion, she stepped forward, ducked beneath the ceremonial rope, and closed the gap between herself and Corporal Langston. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phones rose into the air, recording what everyone knew instinctively. They were witnessing something they shouldn't. Without hesitation, Victoria reached up and yanked the silver cross from Langston's neck. The chain snapped with a sharp metallic crack, the cross falling into her palm like a stolen trophy. For the first time, Langston's jaw tightened, just barely. His eyes didn't move. His body didn't flinch. But something in the air shifted, like the calm before a storm turning on its edge. "Let's see how sacred it really is," Victoria sneered, holding the cross up for the crowd to see. "A little piece of metal," she scoffed. "No miracles, no lightning bolts, just blind faith in a useless charm." She tossed it to the ground, hard, and raised her boot over it, poised to crush it into the stone beneath her heel. That's when Langston moved. Not with rage, not with violence, but with the kind of precision only the military knows. In one fluid motion, his foot swept outward, connecting cleanly with Victoria's ankle. She lost balance, stumbling sideways with a startled yelp, landing on her hands and knees. The crowd recoiled, frozen in stunned silence. Langston didn't look at her. Instead, he stepped forward, not quickly, but deliberately, and retrieved the silver cross from the pavement just before her boot could land. His gloved fingers brushed the stone as he picked it up with reverence. Then, with a quiet, dignified grace, he kissed the cross and slipped it into his breast pocket. For the first time since Victoria's tirade began, Corporal David Langston turned to face her. His eyes locked onto hers, not with anger, but with the kind of strength that only comes from loss, love, and restraint. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but resonant, the crowd hanging on every syllable, "I believe this conversation has gone far enough." The moment didn't need music. It didn't need drama. It had truth. And that was enough. Victoria slowly rose to her feet, brushing dust from her coat with trembling hands, her expression twisted in disbelief. The guard had spoken. After all her jabs, her ridicule, her attempts to provoke, he broke his silence, not with fury, but with a voice calm enough to silence the entire square. She tried to smirk, tried to regain control of the moment. "So, you can talk," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Took a little assault on your superstitions to get a reaction." How telling. Langston didn't blink. He stood tall, every inch the soldier, not just of the crown, but of something far deeper. "What's telling," he replied, eyes fixed on hers, "is that you believe attacking someone's faith requires attacking them physically." There was no anger in his voice, no bitterness, only the steady weight of lived conviction. Around them, the crowd had grown utterly silent, watching not a guard and a heckler, but something much more human. Something real. "You think my silence was surrender," he continued. "It wasn't. It was discipline. You see, I've faced real enemies, under fire, under pressure, and I've learned that not every battle needs to be fought with noise." Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came. Her script, her logic, her entire strategy, suddenly useless. Langston went on, his voice measured and unwavering. "That cross wasn't just a religious token. It belonged to my brother. He died pulling civilians from a burning Humvee in Kandahar. That cross was in his hand when we found him." The words hit harder than any argument. For a moment, even Victoria couldn't hide the flicker of emotion that crossed her face. But pride dies slowly. "That's sad," she muttered, her voice quieter now. "But tragedy doesn't make mythology true." "I'm not asking you to believe in anything," Langston replied. "Faith is a choice, not a requirement. But mocking what you don't understand doesn't make you right. It just makes you loud." By now, security had arrived, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. But Langston showed no interest in punishment. He wasn't trying to win. He wasn't defending doctrine. He was defending memory. Sacrifice, love, meaning. The kind of things that didn't always need explanation, only the courage to carry them, even when the world demands proof. And in that moment, Buckingham Palace didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a battlefield, one where silence finally had its say. The tension hadn't lifted. If anything, it had deepened, settling over the courtyard like a storm that refused to pass. Security stood by, waiting for Corporal Langston to press charges. But he didn't. He glanced at Victoria, now standing rigid, pride bruised, but still defiant. Then he turned back to the officer and quietly shook his head. "I believe the ladies learned enough today," he said. "Sometimes reflection teaches more than punishment." There was a murmur among the crowd, some surprised, others nodding in silent approval. Even Victoria, though still holding her posture, seemed momentarily thrown off balance. Not by force this time, but by mercy. She stared at him, arms crossed. "Don't think this changes anything," she muttered. "Your story's touching, sure, but emotions don't make something true." Langston didn't flinch. "You're right," he said. "Truth doesn't come from emotion, but neither does it always come from a lab. Some truths are lived, not proven." Then, almost as an afterthought, but with the weight of everything that had just happened behind it, he added, "My faith doesn't demand your agreement, only your courtesy, the same courtesy I'd offer your lack of belief." That landed differently. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she had no comeback. The officer approached again. "Sir, are you sure? She laid hands on you, took your property." Langston glanced down at the silver cross now resting in his pocket. That cross was never about rules. It's about what survives when rules break down. He turned back to his post, spine straightening as he returned to ceremonial position, not out of routine, but out of conviction. The man who had been mocked for his silence now stood taller than ever, not because he had shouted, but because he had endured. A child in the crowd tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Why didn't he yell at her?" she asked. The mother smiled softly. "Because real strength doesn't always raise its voice." Victoria stood there a moment longer, looking at the man she'd tried to humiliate. But she didn't say another word. As security guided her gently away, the crowd began to disperse, quieter, more thoughtful than before. And Corporal Langston remained at his post. The silver cross still glinted in his pocket. No longer just a memorial, now a testament. What did you take away from today's story? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to defend something deeply personal, your values, your beliefs, or even your silence, in the face of criticism or misunderstanding? How did you respond? Do you believe that staying calm under pressure, like Corporal Langston did, is a sign of strength? Or would you have handled it differently? Let us know where you're watching from. We're building a global community of thoughtful viewers who appreciate not just action, but meaning behind it. Was Victoria simply being bold, or did she cross a line? And what do you think about Langston's response? Was it too restrained, or just right? Your voice matters here. These stories are meant to spark conversation, not just views. So whether you agree, disagree, or feel somewhere in between, drop a comment and let's talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got more powerful, thought-provoking stories coming your way, including tomorrow's episode that may challenge your ideas even more. Until then, keep asking questions, keep thinking deeper, and most importantly, keep showing up with courage and kindness.